Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are focusing on pure, unadulterated thrash aggression, but we're going to achieve it using maybe the most surgical of instruments, a dedicated graphic equalizer pedal. We are plunging deep into the source material surrounding the MXR KFK1 Kerry King 10-band EQ. Now, for many players, an EQ pedal, it kind of sits on the periphery, right? It's a utility tool, maybe something you use to fix a weird room sound. But for Kerry King, the architect of Slayer's blistering sound, this specific EQ, it was foundational and an integral weapon really required to generate his signature roar. So our mission today is pretty simple, to understand how this particular piece of gear, which came out back in, 2004?
Yeah, 2004.
How it not only defined one of metal's most influential tones, but also set a crucial benchmark for high-performance effects design for the whole industry, really.
Yeah, and the context here is super important, especially if you're into high-gain sound design at all. The KFK1 wasn't just, MXR slapping some tribal graphics on an existing pedal. It was genuinely co-designed with Kerry King, specifically to solve a problem. How do you take those classic high-gain Marshall heads, we're talking JCM 800s, JCM 2000s primarily, and just push them into absolute extreme thrash territory? But crucially, without the low end completely falling apart, turning into mud, or the high end becoming this unusable fizz, King needed surgical precision to carve out his spot in a very loud, very dense mix.
Okay, so let's unpack the core architecture then, because this sounds like where the KFK1 really separated itself from just, a standard EQ pedal. It wasn't just the 10 bands, right? It was how it handled power.
We have to talk about headroom. Honestly, if you take one thing away from this deep dive, understand the importance of 18 volts here. The KFK1, it operates on internal dual power rails, and that provides a full 18-volt operation. That's unlike the standard 9-volt battery or power supply most pedals were running on, especially back then.
And why is that 18 volts so critical?
Well, just think about the signal coming straight out of Kerry King's guitar setup. Yeah. You've got high output EMG pickups driving massive gain stages in the Marshall. That signal is huge. Trying to run that kind of signal into a standard 9-volt pedal, it's like pouring a fire hose into a teacup. It clips immediately. It distorts, compresses in a really nasty, unusable way.
That's
the 18-volt system, just a much bigger bucket.
Yeah.
It provides that essential extra headroom. It meant King could slam massive signal boosts through the pedal, especially hitting the front end of his amp, and still maintain signal integrity. That clean boost capability, that razor-sharp attack.
Yeah.
Hallmarks of his sound. And totally dependent on that high voltage power. It really did set the benchmark for modern high fidelity EQ pedals after that.
Right. And once you've got that clean power base, the amount of sonic control they gave you is kind of astonishing. 10 bands. That offers 10 distinct frequency centers. So you get total command over, pretty much the entire audible spectrum for guitar, right?
Yeah.
From the lowest rumble to the highest sizzle. You're talking frequencies from 31.25 hertz, then 62.5 hertz, 125 hertz, 250, 500 hertz, 1 kilohertz, 2 kilohertz, 4 kilohertz, 8 kilohertz, and way up there at 16 kilohertz.
Yeah, the full range.
And on each one of those bands, you've got plus or minus 12 decibels of control. That's not just tweaking, is it? That's aggressive sculpting.
Oh, yeah. It's the difference between using, a little watercolor brush and using a plasma cutter. It's serious shaping power. And, something that often gets overlooked is just the physical design itself. This thing was built like a tank.
Yeah.
Heavy aluminum chassis, totally road ready. Matte black finish, of course, with King's signature tribal graphics, the ones from his ESP guitar. But maybe the most crucial practical feature, especially for a musician on stage, those illuminated sliders.
The red LEDs.
Yeah, those bright red LEDs.
Yeah.
They meant that Kerry King or anyone using it could see exactly where their tone was set, even on a completely dark stage. And that design element, form-following function, it clearly inspired pretty much every Dunlop EQ pedal that came after, like the standard silver M108S and the M109S redesigns.
Okay, so if we connect this back to the bigger picture, King's actual sound. The KFK1 wasn't just a powerful general EQ then. Sources suggest it was actually tuned a bit differently than the standard M108 it was based on.
That's right. It seems it was factory-tuned with some subtle but pretty crucial tweaks, designed to complement that Marshall thrash rig right out of the box.
Oh, so?
The KFK1 apparently had a slightly deeper inherent bass response baked in, and maybe just a tiny hint of extra presence boost, kind of living in the upper mids. So it was already leaning towards that aggressive sculpted foundation, sort of setting the stage for the famous mid-scoop before you even touch the sliders.
Okay, so let's talk strategy then. How do you actually take that aggressive foundation and turn it into that definitive Slayer rhythm tone? The sound that's massive, crushing, but still incredibly tight and articulate. Because if you cut the mids that drastically, which is kind of essential for that scooped metal sound, doesn't the guitar just vanish? How did King keep the presence?
That is the essential balancing act, isn't it, for high-gain metal tone?
Yeah.
You basically have to destroy the mid-range body, but then rebuild the high-mid attack.
Yeah.
So the rhythm recipe, it involves a couple of key moves. First, the famous mid-scoop, cutting pretty heavily around 500 hertz.
Right.
That's where a traditional guitar tone gets its sort of body and honk. You want that gone for this kind of rhythm sound.
Okay, scooped at 500 hertz, but then...
But yeah, if you just scoop, you lose all your cut, all your articulation in the mix. So King used the upper frequencies to basically build it back up. He strategically boosted the 2 kilohertz to 4 kilohertz range. That pushes those upper mids forward. It defines the pick attack, the bite, the clarity. That's the sound of the guitar slicing through everything else, even when it's saturated with tons of gain.
And the low end has to be just as strategic, I imagine. Thrash needs that really tight, almost percussive low end. Boosting bass wildly just gives you mud, right? Especially live.
It's exactly right. The low end needs surgery too. King would boost the muscle frequencies, usually around 62.5 hertz and 125 hertz. That's where the thump and the power really live. But, and this is crucial, he'd cut the lowest sub-bass band, the one at 31.25 hertz.
Get rid of the real deep rumble.
Precisely. That's the frequency that just clouds everything up, makes your whole sound muddy and loose, especially in a live room or through a big PA. By cutting that sub-bass, the low end stays tight, punchy, controllable, powerful, but focused.
What's also fascinating here is the flexibility the controls give you. It wasn't just the 10 sliders. You also had separate knobs for overall, gain the final output level, and volume the input level boost, or cut into the EQ circuit itself.
Yeah, that separation is incredibly powerful, especially for a player like King who's thinking about gain staging. If you wanted to, say, drive the EQ circuit itself a bit harder, maybe get a slightly different texture from the pedal, you could boost that input volume knob. Then you could use a separate gain knob to set the final output level going to the amplifier, totally independent of that initial input boost.
So you can shape the tone with the sliders and then use the gain knob almost like a clean output boost, pushing the amp's input tubes even harder for more compression, more saturation, but keeping the EQ curve you just dialed in.
Exactly. That's a level of flexibility most single knob boost or EQ pedals just can't offer. It's really smart design for dialing in aggressive tones.
Okay, so we've carved the tone, we've honed the low end, optimized the signal with the 18 volts. Now, the classic question, where do you put this surgical weapon in the signal chain to maximize the carnage?
Well, the beauty of the KFK1, and really any good graphic EQ, is its versatility here. It can work brilliantly both as a pre-distortion shaper and as a post-distortion finisher. So when you place the KFK1 before the amplifier, right in the front end, it acts as a very specific tonal filter before the signal hits the Marshall's preamp tubes, before the main distortion happens. So it's shaping the frequency content, brightening, darkening, scooping, boosting, that the amp then distorts. This fundamentally changes how the amp feels and reacts, affects the pick attack, the saturation character, everything.
Okay, so that's shaping the core distortion, but what about in the effects loop?
Right. If you place the KFK1 in the effects loop, meaning after the Marshall's powerful preamp distortion stage, but before the power amp, you're using it as a post-distortion equalizer. Now it acts more like a studio engineer's tool. You're fine-tuning the overall presence and the shape of the already distorted sound, making it sit perfectly in the final mix, carving out space.
And I love this detail. King didn't just choose one or the other placement. He apparently went for the extreme setup. Our sources seem to confirm he ran 2 KFK1s at the same time.
That's the legend, yeah.
One before the amp's gain stage for that pre-shaping we talked about, and another one in the effects loop for fine-tuning the final distorted sound. That level of dedication to tonal dominance is just, well, it's very Kerry King, isn't it?
It absolutely is. It speaks volumes about how much he valued that surgical level of control. I mean, most players struggle to integrate even one EQ effectively. He used 2 to ensure absolute sonic command. It's intense.
And what really stands out about the legacy of this pedal, thinking back, is that MXR wasn't just, cashing in on his name with some graphics. This was genuinely engineering tied to a specific need.
Absolutely. The KFK1 really was one of the first artist signature EQ pedals ever released that felt genuinely tuned and designed for the artist's specific sonic requirements and rig. It wasn't just a cosmetic variant of the M108. It was vital to that modern Slayer sound, totally integral to achieving those incredibly tight, ripped, scooped tones you hear on albums like God Hates Us All and Christ Illusion.
Yeah, defining albums for that era.
For sure. And critically, its high-voltage performance, that 18V operation, it really did set a new standard. It proved that a stomp box, a pedal on the floor, could perform with the kind of precision, low noise, and reliability you'd normally expect from high-end studio rack gear. That whole shift, bringing 18-volt headroom and surgical 10-band control down to the pedal board level, it definitely influenced a whole generation of effects designers, especially for heavier music.
And while, yeah, those core features, particularly the 18-volt headroom, were later adopted by Dunlop into their updated non-signature standard models like the M108S,
Right.
the original KFK1, it's still really praised for its specific clarity, that bomb-proof build quality, and of course those iconic tribal graphics. It has its own kind of cult status. All right, let's move from the theory and the history to actual action. If you, listening right now, wanted to try and dial in that ultimate aggressive razor-edge tone, the sound that just screams Slayer, that Rain and Blood DNA, what were the actual specific settings King was known for using?
Okay, this is the aggressive recipe revealed. Let's walk through the sliders. We start with a strategic low-end control. First, you cut the deep rumble frequency, 31.25 hertz. Take that down to about an XC3 dB.
Okay, cut the mud.
Then you boost the crucial power bands, get that punch and muscle. 62.5 hertz goes up to plus 3 dB, and 125 hertz gets cranked even more, up to plus 5 dB. That gives you that tight, powerful foundation.
Got it. Plus 3 at 62.5, plus 5 at 125. Then we get to the famous mid-range annihilation.
Precisely. You start with a slight dip at 250 hertz, maybe down to megas 2 dB, just cleaning up the lower mids a touch. But the aggressive defining scoop happens right at 500 hertz. Drive that one way down, a massive -6 dB cut.
-6? Wow.
Yeah, that's the complete removal of the guitar's traditional body, stripping it right back to just bare aggressive attack.
Okay, 500 hertz gutted. What's next?
Next, we rebuild the articulation using the higher frequencies. We actually dip 1 kilohertz slightly, maybe to get us 3 dB. But then we heavily boost the clarity and cut frequencies. 2 kilohertz gets pushed up to plus 5 dB, and 4 kilohertz is boosted to plus 4 dB.
Ah, so that's the pick attack, the razor coming back.
That's exactly it. That's the sound of the pick hitting the strings cutting through. Keeps the sound present and aggressive, not just scooped and lost. Finally, maybe a slight boost at 8 kilohertz, say plus 2 dB, just for a little extra sizzle. And then 16 kilohertz is often left flat at 0 dB. You don't want too much air fizz.
That is one destructive-looking EQ curve. Okay, so sliders set, but then you need that final push, right? The output section.
Absolutely essential. After all that surgical shaping with the sliders, you need to drive the amplifier into total submission. The final critical piece of the recipe is using those separate volume and gain knobs for an output boost. Typically, the input volume might be set around plus 2 dB.
Okay.
And then the independent master gain control is pushed up to plus 3 dB, maybe even more depending on the amp. That final kick from the gain knob is what makes the tone not just, carved, but truly dominant, a sound that absolutely pushes through the mix with raw, unrelenting power. So yeah, if we look back at the KFK1, it's clearly way more than just another utility pedal, isn't it?
Seems like it.
It was a really critical piece of engineering that absolutely helped shape a genre. It solved a very specific, very high-stakes tonal problem for one of metal's most demanding players. And in doing that, it kind of forced the entire industry to rethink the standards for precision, for power, for headroom, especially in the world of heavy music effects. It raised the bar.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting for me thinking about this. The KFK1 proved pretty definitively that a dedicated utility stomp box, designed almost 20 years ago now,
Yeah, crazy how time flies.
could provide genuine studio-grade precision and power running at 18 volts, all in this rugged, road-ready box. So if that much critical, specialized engineering focus went into a utility effect, like a graphic EQ, a piece of gear that, let's be honest, most players kind of overlook in favor of flashier distortions or cool modulation pedals. What does that tell us about the potential hidden power and complexity maybe residing in the other, often humble-looking aluminum boxes on our modern pedal boards? Does every compressor, every buffer, maybe even every simple noise gate we use hold its own secret engineering story that could be dramatically influencing our sound in ways we don't even realize? Something to maybe mull over the next time you look down at those utilitarian boxes hiding there in the shadow of your main distortion pedal. Thanks for diving deep with us today.